What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and the combine is all but wrapped up. We had a lot of players have a really good combine and a lot of players rising up people's boards, and then we also had guys that didn't have great combines and probably slid down people's boards. So this is the first mock draft post combine. We're going to do 2 rounds in this mock draft. No trades except for maybe one. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so coming in at number 1, we got the Bears, and even after the combine, I know Caleb Williams made a lot of people mad with, not doing physicals there, not, competing, blah, 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 which is normal for top prospects. Maybe not the medical part, but, not throwing, not, running the drills. That's normal for number 1 overall picks. And he said in his interviews that he will be, doing physicals and medicals for teams that interview him, which I don't have a problem with. I know a lot of, people, a lot of fans think that's a problem. I don't necessarily think so. I still think that the Bears should draft Caleb Williams and will draft Caleb Williams, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, there will be one trade in this mock draft, and that's going to be what the Bears are going to do with Justin Fields, so stay tuned for that. But other than that, there's not going to be any trades in this one. We're just going to be looking at the players who help their stock and where players are going to go after the combine. So at number 2, we got the Commanders, and I know a lot of people, or at least a popular pick, is to go Jaden Daniels here at number 2, but I still think it's Drake May. We're in the area now where there's a lot of smoke screens, there's a lot of false rumors. I still think Drake May's solidified himself as the number 2 quarterback in the class, so we're going to go with Drake May here. Now, in my opinion, this is where the draft actually starts, is with the Patriots, because the Patriots could, 1, just draft Jaden Daniels, 2, stick and pick and draft the best player in the draft, Marvin Harrison Jr., or 3, trade down with a QB needy team like maybe the Giants, Falcons, Broncos, Saints. There's a lot of QB needy teams that are going to be vying for this number 3 selection. Do I ultimately think that the Patriots are going to trade down? I don't think so, because they need a quarterback themselves, and they need one pretty badly. You could go Marvin Harrison Jr. They also need receivers that are able to separate, but I don't want them to waste Marvin Harrison's first year or two with a mediocre quarterback. So we're gonna go with Jaden Daniels, reset that quarterback clock, and then build from there. Moving on to number 4, we got the Cardinals, and I think if Marvin Harrison Jr. falls, they take Marvin Harrison Jr. 100% of the time. I know. There's rumors that some teams have Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr., and although that may be true, but again, a lot of smoke screens, a lot of things are happening, false rumors, so I still think Marvin Harrison Jr. should be the first non-quarterback taken off the board, whether that's at 3 or 4 to the Cardinals. Now, at number 5, it can get also a little bit interesting. Again, we're not doing trades, but this could be a trade down option. You could go, tackle, or replace that right tackle and trade Pipkins with a guy like Joe Alt, Olaf Ashanu, Talise Fuaga. You could go with a, ultra weapon and a Brock Bowers, although apparently he wasn't interviewing the best at the combine, but again, all rumors. You could go Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and I think in all likelihood that'll be the most realistic option, just because there's a possibility that neither Keenan Allen or Mike Williams aren't on the team this coming season. I think it's very likely that at least one of them aren't going to be on the team. And, the guys behind them, like Quinn Johnston, obviously had a very bad rookie season. You can't really rely on him. So you need that either number 2 receiver or number 3 receiver. Now, a lot of people like Rome Odunze over Malik Neighbors. I guess that's the popular pick nowadays. I still think it's Malik Neighbors, so we're going to go with Malik Neighbors here at number 5, which leaves the Giants in a very difficult situation. Do the Giants maybe move Evan Neal from right tackle into right guard and draft a guy like Joe Alt? Possible. Do they go with a Rome Odunze, taking a number 3 receiver off the board at number 6 is... it seems like a bad idea, but Rome Odunze is definitely worth this pick. Or do you go with maybe a trade down? Although I don't know which teams would be wanting a trade at this point. Because if you want to trade down, you got to find a team to trade up with you. And I don't know if that's a possibility here. So you could also go Brock Bowers, because apparently Darren Waller's, thinking about retirement. But ultimately, we're still going to go with Rome Odunze. Because Rome Odunze is a number one type receiver, especially if he goes to a team like the Giants. The Giants need receiver help desperately. And having Rome Odunze with Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson, that's a really young core. And, Daniel Jones, I think, could get them the ball. I think Daniel Jones had a very, very down season because of, injuries to himself and to his offensive line. I think he will bounce back. And, I don't think he's ever going to be a top 10 quarterback or even maybe a top 15 quarterback. But, I think you just gotta roll with him for one more year and then think about, your future after him after next year. Moving on to number 7, though, we got the Titans, and I think this is a pretty obvious Joe Alt pick. If one of these 3 receivers fell to the Titans, I think that's a very, realistic opportunity for the Titans to get another receiver to go along with Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins, but you're not going to take wide receiver 4 off the board at 7, especially since there's no one really worth it. But you're going to get your bookend left tackle here, and, the Titans, I know they got a whole new coaching regime, but it's in the Titans' DNA to run the ball, so getting a good offensive lineman like Joe Alt, you can't go wrong with that. Moving on to number 8, we got the Falcons, and I think this is where things could get a little interesting. We have yet to have a defensive player off the board, and I think that changes here at number 8. Thing is, do you go with a defensive back like a Nate Wiggins who had a really good combine? He did hurt himself, but that's not going to affect his draft placement. Do you go with a edge rusher like a Dallas Turner or Jared Verse? Dallas Turner had a very solid combine, so I think we're going to go with Jared Verse. You got a defensive-minded head coach now with Raheem Morris, and I think that he could do similar to what DeMeco Ryans did with the Texans and get your edge rusher of the future. In his case, Will Anderson, and in this case, Dallas Turner, both Alabama edge rushers. Moving on at number 9, we got the Bears pick in here, and this could be a little tough. Do you go with a defensive player? I think so. This could be a receiver pick if one of those 3 receivers fell, but they didn't. So, could go Brock Bowers here. That would be interesting. But I think we're going to go with a cornerback here at number 9. And the question is, which cornerback do we go with? Because there's no number 1 corner in this class. There's a lot of really solid ones, but there's no, solidified number 1. You got Nate Wiggins, who had a solid combine, like I said. You got Quinion Mitchell, who's had just a really solid draft process in general. With the Senior Bowl draft combine, I'm sure he'll have a really good pro day. Do you go with a Terrion Arnold, who's, been hyped up most of the draft process? Or you could even go with a Quillen McKinstry, who's just been really solid and was widely known as the number 1 corner going into summer scouting. In my opinion, I think the first cornerback could very possibly be Quinion Mitchell. Do I think that Quinion Mitchell should be the number 1 corner? No, I like Cooper DeJean a lot. But Quinion Mitchell has just been rising up people's boards a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first cornerback taken. So, it might look a little weird having Quinion Mitchell go number 9 to the Bears, but he's a very solid player, and I really do think he could sneak his way into the top 10. Is it likely? Maybe not, but this is just a mock draft. We're just going over different possibilities post-combine. So moving on to number 10, we got the Jets, and I think that with 2 of the top 3 tackles still on the board, Talise Fuaga and Olu Fashanu, I think you got to get Aaron Rodgers some protection, and Talise Fuaga is more of that, nasty run blocker. And if you want to get Aaron Rodgers some protection, I think you go with Olu Fashanu. He's the more polished pass protector. And if you want to get Aaron Rodgers some protection, that's what you do. Moving on to number 11, we got the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this could be a quarterback. I think the biggest question now is where does J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix go? I really do think that the Vikings are going to re-sign Kirk Cousins to a 2 or 3 year deal, so it doesn't make sense to draft a quarterback here at number 11. So we're going to look to go with probably one of the hottest risers in the draft, and a Byron Murphy. Vikings need help on that interior of the defensive line. Byron Murphy isn't my number 1 defensive tackle, but I do think that he will be the NFL's number 1 defensive tackle. Now moving on to number 12, we got the Broncos. And I think this is where we go with J.J. McCarthy. Now, my reasoning for this is, 1, Sean Payton is completely done with Russell Wilson. He's not going to be on the team next year, in all likelihood. Now, I don't want JJ McCarthy starting year one, or at least week one. So the Broncos could draft some veteran quarterback, whether that's maybe a Ryan Tannehill, someone like that, just a veteran quarterback, a bridge quarterback, and have JJ McCarthy learn behind him. I really don't want the Broncos starting JJ McCarthy number one overall, year one, but I do think that JJ McCarthy will be a Bronco next season. Moving on to 13, we got the Raiders, and this could possibly be a tackle pick. They got their left tackle in Colton Miller, but their right tackle is up in the air. And with a guy like Talise Fuaga still on the board, you could go him, or you could have, basically your pick of cornerback. Again, Nate Wiggins, Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry. There's a lot of really solid cornerbacks. But Talise Fuaga, I think, is the best player out of the bunch. Improving your offensive line is never a bad idea, especially when you have a subpar quarterback starting for you. Moving on to 14, we got the Saints, and that really kind of hurts the Saints because the Saints desperately need a tackle now with Ryan Ramczyk possibly retiring. And if he doesn't retire, I don't think he's going to be the same with his knee problems. Trevor Penning is not good. He's not going to be a starter long term. So I think you need a tackle. And with Talise Fuaga off the board, that sucks. But I still think you could go with J.C. Latham here. Again, he's a right tackle. He's a mauler in the run game. You need tackles on both sides, so at least start with the right side. And, I mean, he could play left tackle, but I'd much rather him just stay at right tackle. Moving on to 15, we got the Colts. And I think the Colts could have went one of these solid cornerbacks, but with Brock Bowers still on the board, I think you got to get Anthony Richardson some more weapons. Whether that's tight end, receiver, running back, you need to get him something. Hopefully they re-sign Michael Pittman, which, I mean, I'm almost positive he's going to be on the team next season, whether it's on the franchise tag or if they sign him long term. But why not get him just an ultra weapon and a Brock Bowers as well? Anthony Richardson isn't the most accurate quarterback in the world, but if you surround him with weapons who are going to get open, I think Anthony Richardson could thrive in Indianapolis. Moving on to 16, we got the Seahawks, and this could be either edge rusher or, I guess you could go Jackson Paris-Johnson. Maybe a little too rich for me. I really love JPJ, but 16, I don't know. I could definitely see it happening, but if I was a Seahawks fan, I would be a little iffy on that one. I'm going to go with Jared Verse, though. Getting more edge rush help is always a good idea, and Jared Verse is one of the best ones in the class. Moving on to the Jaguars at 17. This is probably a cornerback pick with these, top three still on the board, and if you want to include Kool-Aid McKinstry in this as well. Again, I think Terrion Arnold, most teams are in love with him from what I hear. I like Nate Wiggins and Cooper DeJean a bit more, and even Kool-Aid McKinstry. But I think Terrion Arnold is most likely going to go above those guys. He's just an all-around prospect, and he has, all the potential in the world. Moving on to 18, we got the Bengals. And they could look to go tackle here with an Amarius Mims. Could look to go with, I guess, maybe a Jerzon Newton. Actually, Jerzon Newton actually is pretty tempting here. I know they went defensive line last year with Myles Murphy, but I think they could go with Jerzon Newton here. I think that if like a J.C. Latham or a Olaf Ashanu, Talise Fuaga was still on the board here at 18. There you go, him, no doubt. Amarius Mims is a bit more questionable. He is, definitely a project. He hasn't had much experience at playing tackle at the college level, let alone obviously the NFL level. So, I think we're gonna go with Jerzon Newton here. He's my defensive tackle 1. I think I have him over Byron Murphy at this point, but getting Jerzon Newton at 18 is a steal in my opinion. Even though I know NFL teams, I guess, view him as a second-round pick. Moving on to 19, we got the Los Angeles Rams. And I think this is, I always go BPA on the defense, whether that's Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Leatu Latu. But I'm going to end up going with Nate Wiggins here. I think Nate Wiggins is possibly my CB1. It's between him and Cooper DeJean for me. But I think Nate Wiggins is that more prototypical outside cornerback. And the Rams need help everywhere except for defensive tackle. Moving on to 20, we got the Steelers. And I know this is such a base pick, but it just makes sense with how the board's fallen. I guess you could go Kool-Aid McKinstry or Cooper DeJean, but with Amarius Mims still on the board, pairing him up with his former teammate Broderick Jones and having near two potential left tackles of the future, or not left tackles, two tackles of the future, is very enticing for the Steelers in my opinion. Moving on to 21, we got the Miami Dolphins. Maybe, again, another base pick, but this is where I love Jackson Powers-Johnson going. It just makes all the sense in the world. The Dolphins need interior offensive line help. They really need offensive line help in general. And with a guy like JPJ still on the board at 21, I think that's the perfect spot for him. Moving on to 22, we got the Eagles. And the Eagles need really three things, maybe four. They need receiver, linebacker, cornerback, and safety. When you look at the board right now, according to PFF, we're at Cooper DeJean, who's ranked 7 overall. You got Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I think a lot of Eagles fans are, rooting for. You got Tyler Nubin, although that is more unlikely. Peyton Wilson, I don't think he's going to be a first-round player. I don't think there's a linebacker worth taking. You could go Brian Thomas Jr. here. That would be very interesting. But I think Cooper DeJean makes all the sense in the world. Because if Darius Slay and James Bradbury come back, those are your two outside corners. And I know you got Avonte Maddox, but Cooper DeJean will be an amazing slot cornerback year one. And then because Darius Slay's getting up there in age as well as James Bradbury. So once them two, kind of fall out of the rotation or, get cut, traded, whatever, Cooper DeJean could be an amazing outside corner as well. So we're going to go with Cooper DeJean here. Eagles fans, from what I've seen, don't really like that idea, but I love it. Moving on to 23, we got the Texans. And I usually go defensive tackle for them, but the two defensive tackles worth taking, and Jer'Zhan Newton and Byron Murphy, are both off the board. So we're going to pivot, and we're probably going to go with receiver. Now, after the combine, we've had some really interesting movement at the receiver position. Brian Thomas Jr. showed out at the combine, and he is usually my wide receiver 4 in mock drafts. But also, A.D. Mitchell really, really helped his case as that wide receiver 4. Troy Franklin, again, I love Troy Franklin, but I do think he might have dropped a bit in terms of where I think he'll go in the draft. I still think he's a really good receiver. He still might be my 5th receiver in the class, but I think Brian Thomas Jr. is still the pick here. Having Brian Thomas and Nico Collins on the outside with Tank Dell on the inside and C.J. Stroud throwing them the ball. I mean, come on now. I don't know what Texans fans wouldn't like that. And then we could hopefully go defensive tackle in the second round. Moving on here to the Cowboys. I think this has got to be an offensive line. You could go Troy Fautanu, Graham Barton. They're both listed as tackles, but they're more likely going to be guards in the NFL. Tyler Guyton is a work in progress at the tackle position. And apparently Tyron Smith is most likely not coming back to the Cowboys. So getting a guy like Tyler Guyton, although he might not be the best year one, I think he'll be a really good tackle in the future. So getting him here at 24, I think that's a really realistic option. Although I'm not the biggest fan of Tyler Guyton, but I could definitely see him going here at 24. Moving on to the Packers here at 25. They need secondary help, whether that's safety or cornerback. You could go Tyler Nubin, although I don't think a safety is the best idea, at least in the first round. So we're going to go with Kool-Aid McKinstry, pairing him up with Jair Alexander. I mean, come on now. Moving on to 26, we got the Buccaneers. I think it's between edge rusher and cornerback. And with most of the cornerbacks going off the board after Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think there was a sizable drop-off. But there is still a Leatu Latu here. And apparently, from what I've heard, his medicals have, for the most part, checked out. Again, rumors, who really knows. But Leatu Latu, he tested pretty well. I thought he was going to test a little bit worse than he did, but he actually had a solid combine. So we're going to go with Leatu Latu here at 26 to the Buccaneers. Moving on to 27, we got the Cardinals. We took Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th pick. We could still look to go offense. And I can't remember who I seen. I think it was Bengals said this, that they could realistically double dip at receiver because Hollywood Brown's a free agent. Rondale Moore is a free agent. Michael Wilson is going to be on the team, but he has injury issues, and he's a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. No more than that, in my opinion. So they could realistically double dip at receiver. Although I think if that is the case, they wouldn't double dip here at 27. They would double dip at 35. So here at 27, I think we're going to go with either Troy Fautanu or Graham Barton. And because I'm not the biggest fan of Will Hernandez, I think he is definitely replaceable. And we're going to replace him with Graham Barton, I think. Again, that's a toss-up. It's more of like, which flavor would you like? I think Graham Barton has a little bit... I think Graham Barton would be a better suited guard than Troy Fautanu. Although if you want positional flexibility, you would probably go with Troy Fautanu. Moving on to 28, we got the Buffalo Bills. And again, I go receiver for them almost every time. But I think we're going to continue because A.D. Mitchell is, I think, a lock to go in the first round now after the combine. So what better place than the Bills? Having Josh Allen, throw on A.D. Mitchell and Stephon Diggs the ball, I think that's the yin and yang. And I think that's just a match made in heaven. Moving on to 29, we got the Lions. And I think this could be a Troy Fautanu pick. The Lions love running the ball, and Frank Ragnow, is up there in age. He's got, injury history. So why not get a guy like Troy Fautanu who could play all over the field? I think he's best suited for guard, but again, he could play tackle in a pinch. And I'm sure he could play center in a pinch as well, but he's more suited as a guard. But the Lions love running the ball, so just keep improving that offensive line. All right, moving on to the Ravens. It's really between receiver and cornerback for him. Do I think it's realistic that they go with a guy like Troy Franklin or Ladd McConkey? Yeah, I think that is realistic. But I do think they're a little bit more in need of a cornerback to pair up with Marlon Humphrey because after Marlon Humphrey, they don't really have much. And Marlon Humphrey is also injury prone, or at least he was last season. So, I don't know. Ennis Rakestraw, TJ Tampa, and Kamari Lassiter are all fringe first round guys. Like if they snuck into the first round, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think the one that's most likely a first rounder in this little group of 3 is probably Ennis Rakestraw. So it's really between Ennis Rakestraw or a Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman, and Ladd McConkey. I don't know. I think the Ravens would probably like to get a cornerback more because, again, this receiver class is so deep, they could find one in the second round, a receiver that is. Cornerback, again, look. Ennis Rakestraw, TJ Tampa, Kamari Lassiter, and then there's a bit of a drop-off. Kyrie Jackson, I'm a big fan of. Mike Sanders still is a slot cornerback. And then, again, Jerry and Jones, Chris Abrams-Drain. Again, they're more third-round players, in my opinion. So I think we're going to, go with Ennis Rakestraw Jr., and then hopefully a receiver falls to us in the second round. Moving on to 31, we got the 49ers. And I think I usually go tackle for him to help develop under Trent Williams. It's looking a little thin here at tackle. Do I think Kingsley Suamataia could, sneak into the first round? Absolutely. But they could also go, again, cornerback is thin, especially with the, Ravens taking Ennis Rakestraw. I don't think that TJ Tampa as well as Ennis Rakestraw are all going to fit into the first round. I don't see that happening. And this is more of a luxury pick for the 49ers. You could go also edge rusher because Chase Young is, a free agent. Could, maybe not return. Could also. Depends on how much money he's demanding. But I think we're going to go with a developmental guy in Kingsley Suamataia. Again, he doesn't have to start year one. He can learn behind one of the best to ever do it in Trent Williams. And then hopefully he can develop into a really solid left tackle for him, in year 2, 3, and 4 of his rookie contract. Moving on to 32, we got the Chiefs. Again, this is where we're going to get a little fun. Xavier Worthy broke the record for the 40-yard dash with a 4.21. What do the Chiefs like? They like speed. They need a receiver. Again, this is no Tyreek Hill replacement. And We've seen what breaking the 40-yard dash record could do for a player's stock. Just look at John Ross. Top 10 pick, probably didn't deserve to go in the first 2 rounds. Xavier Worthy, again, was always a fringe first-round pick for me. I thought him and Troy Franklin were the premier deep threats in the class, and I think Xavier Worthy may have jumped Troy Franklin in terms of mock drafts. So, again, I think that's a bit of a fun pick for the Chiefs, but they need receiver. Why not get a speedster in Xavier Worthy and then have that underneath, receiver in Rashee Rice? Moving on to the second round here, and we're going to I don't want to say speed through the second round, but we're going to go a little bit faster here, so this way the video is not an hour long. So here at 33, we got the Panthers with their first pick in the draft. I think you got to get a separator at receiver, whether that's Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey. Again, Keon Coleman, I really like Keon Coleman, but the Panthers need a separator, and that's not really Keon Coleman's game. So I think we're going to end up going with the best separator in the class and Ladd McConkey. Again, Bryce Young just needs guys to throw the ball to and guys that are going to get open, and that's exactly what Ladd McConkey is going to do. Moving on to 34, we got the Patriots. And I think this could be where Troy Franklin goes. Again, Patriots also need guys that can separate, and, Jaden Daniels is going to need someone to throw to because Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne, all those guys were not separating at all. I'm pretty sure the Patriots had like 2 or 3 receivers / tight ends in the top 10 of, least separation. So they need separators. Troy Franklin can do that, whether that's over the top. He's also a really smooth route runner. Only question is his size, but, I'm not too worried about it. Moving on to 35, we got the Cardinals again. They went with Graham Barton and Marvin Harrison Jr., so we could look to go defense here. Again, I talked about earlier about them double dipping a receiver. I think that's more of just a fun little experiment. I don't think that's all too likely. And also, I don't think that they're going to go 3 back-to-back offensive players when their defense needs just as much help as their offense. So we could look to go edge rusher here. They have BJ Ojulari, a super bendy, raw athlete at the edge rusher position. You could also go with Chop Robinson, who again had a really good combine. And, has all the traits in the world, just doesn't have the production to back it up. I think Chop Robinson could have played himself into the first round. It just didn't end up happening in this mock draft. But I do think he helped his stock a lot. So we're going to go with Chop Robinson there at 35. Move on to 36, we got the Commanders. They went Drake May in the first round. Now they need either offensive line help or defensive line help. That's the only 2 picks here we could go for the Commanders here. So it's really just, would you rather a Chris Braswell or a Jordan Morgan, Adisa Isaac maybe, Darius Robinson? I think we're going to end up going offensive line help because you drafted a quarterback. If we've seen with Bryce Young, if the quarterback doesn't have any weapons or any protection, they're going to struggle year one. So we're going to look to go with probably a tackle. They just released Charles Leno, I believe. So do you want to go with, Kieran Amagaji, or do you want to go with the Jordan Morgan? Jordan Morgan is definitely the more polished prospect. Let's look at the guard selection as well. I mean, you could go Zach Frazier. Zach Frazier is a monster. But I think they need to go tackle. That's the, more important position. And again, Jordan Morgan, tackle, guard, more of a tackle in my opinion. So we're going to go with Jordan Morgan there at 36. Moving on to 37, we got the Chargers. They went with Malik Neighbors in the first round. They could look to go, where could they look to go? They could look to go offensive tackle, although there's no one really there. Could look to go maybe edge rusher, because I don't think Khalil Mack's going to be on the team much longer. But again, this might be a bit of an irresponsible pick, although a very fun pick. Wait, where is he at? Well, they have Trey Benson at 134 overall. I think he's just as much in contention as the number 1 running back with the Jonathan Brooks and Blake Corum and a Jalen Wright. But I think Trey Benson is my number 1 running back as of right now. And, Austin Eckler had a really down year. He's a free agent. Don't see him coming back. So we're going to go with a receiver here, a running back. And I know we went receiver in the first round, running back in the second round. Bit irresponsible, but this is just a fun mock draft again. Don't take it too seriously. We're going to go with Trey Benson here. He ran way faster than I thought he was. and he's also got great contact balance. He's really just the all-around package now. I had questions on his long speed. Again, I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think it was elite like he ran. What did he run again? I believe it was I think it was 4.3, 4.38. Let's look it up real quick. Yeah, 4.39. So, again, a receiver at, what do they have him listed at? 223. Running back at 223, running, sub 4 or sub 4.4. I mean, come on now. Moving on to the Titans. Oh gosh, the Titans. We could look to go receiver. Again, I said that they could go receiver in the first round if Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors fell to him. Didn't end up happening, so they took Joe Alt. But I think they could go with Keon Coleman here. He's, in the same mold of a DeAndre Hopkins. Again, not saying he's going to be a DeAndre Hopkins, but, same play style. And DeAndre Hopkins isn't going to be on the Titans for, much longer. He's, on the wrong side of 30. So we're going to go with Keon Coleman here. He could be the receiver 3 as of right now, but he could slide into the even receiver 1 because Treylon Burks has not lived up to the hype so far. Moving on to 39, we got my New York Giants, and what did we go? Rome Odunze. So now we could look to go with a guard, and Zach Frazier would be amazing here. We could look to go with Tyler Nubin if Xavier McKinney doesn't come back. What else? We could go Kamari Lassiter. Jatavion Sanders is interesting. Again, like I said, Darren Waller may retire, although I think he'll come back for one more year. But we're going to go with Zach Frazier here. We just released Mark Lewinsky, so we need guard help, pretty badly. So why not kick out Zach Frazier to guard? Moving on to 40, we got the Commanders' second pick of the second round. We took Jordan Morgan and Drake May so far. We could look to go edge rusher here with a Chris Braswell, Adisa Isaac, Darius Robinson. But Jatavion Sanders just seems like a Commander to me. I don't know. He's always seemed like a Commander to me. And they also need tight end help desperately with Logan Thomas getting up there in age. But is it a bit irresponsible when you hardly have anyone besides, I guess, KJ Henry at edge rusher? Yes, it is definitely irresponsible. But what can I say? I'm an irresponsible guy. And, don't just say because I'm a Giants fan, I made a bad pick for the Commanders. I think this is in all likelihood a very real possibility. Moving on to 41, we got the Green Bay Packers. We could look to double dip in the secondary with a Tyler Nubin. Could look to go with maybe a Tavondre Sweat, Chris Jenkins, someone like that. Braden Fisk also had a really good combine. But I think we're going to double dip in the secondary. Simone Biles' husband, I can't remember his name. Jeez. But yeah, him, he's not a starter for much longer. So we're going to go with Tyler Nubin, pairing him up with Darnell Savage, and then having Kool-Aid McKinstry and Jair Alexander on the two ends. I mean, come on now. Moving on to 42, we got the Minnesota Vikings. And like I said, I think Kirk Cousins is going to sign a 2 or 3 year deal. So it doesn't make sense to draft a Bo Nix or Michael Penix here and have him sit behind Kirk Cousins for 2 or 3 years. Although we have seen it work out with a guy like Jordan Love. But I don't think we're going to do that here. I think we're going to look to go secondary. Byron Murphy is really the only cornerback they have that's, solid. So we could look to go with Kamari Lassiter or TJ Tampa. Kamari Lassiter has a bit of, athletic concerns. I really like him. I think he's a really solid and instinctual player. But I think TJ Tampa is a more likely player to go in the second round. Moving on to 43, we got this is going to be the Bears pick. Okay. This is where we're going to trade for Justin Fields. Sorry, I forgot all about that one. So we are going to go with, where's the Chicago Bears? Here we go. We're going to trade Justin Fields to the Atlanta Falcons for the 43rd overall pick. And I know that apparently the Justin Fields market's not as strong as we initially thought, but I think a second round pick could get it done. So we're going to offer that. Hopefully that just goes through. Yep. All right, so now we got the Bears picking here at 43, and we got the Falcons trading for Justin Fields. Now here at 43, I think the Bears could go edge rusher. You know, I was close to going edge rusher here at number 9, maybe like a Jared Verse, but we ended up going Quinion Mitchell. So why not get a Chris Braswell here? It's either Chris Braswell or Adisa Isaac. Darius Robinson, he's a bit, I don't know. I don't think he fits with the Bears as much. So we're going to go with, let's go with Adisa Isaac. Again, I think it's a coin flip between him and Chris Braswell as of right now, but why not go Adisa Isaac there? 44, we got the Raiders. And again, this could be a quarterback pick, either Michael Penix or Bo Nix, but we're gonna end up passing on him. I mean, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is gonna stay around for a little bit longer than Raiders fans would like. So we're gonna look to go with cornerback here. Cornerback's a very thin area for the Raiders. You could also look to go with a defensive tackle like who's still on the board? I know a Chris Jenkins still on the board, Braden Fisk, Ruka Rojo, Tavondre Sweat, Michael Hall, a lot of really good players. But I think we're going to end up going with Kamari Lassiter here. Again, I'm a really big fan of Kamari Lassiter. I think he could really thrive as long as he's not the number 1 cornerback on a team. Moving on to 45, we got the Saints, and I think this is where we go with a quarterback, whether we go Michael Penix or Bo Nix. Oh man, that's tough to say. I'm more of a Bo Nix guy. I know a lot of people are more of a Michael Penix guy, but oh man, we're gonna go with Bo Nix. I know he's a quote-unquote check-down machine, but I don't know. Maybe he could be the next Drew Brees for the Saints. Moving on to 46, we got the Colts. Moving on to the Colts, we decided to take Darius Robinson. The Colts need edge rush help, in my opinion. Kwity Paye is a good secondary pass rusher. I don't think he's going to be a number 1 on no team. And Samson Ebukam, I think is how you pronounce it. I mean, he's not, an edge rusher of the future. So why not get a guy like Darius Robinson who can rush from the inside or the outside? He's a very versatile guy, in my opinion. So I ended up going 46 with Darius Robinson. Moving on to 47, we got the Giants. This is the Seattle pick from the Leonard Williams trade. And I think we could go with a edge rusher. We could go with probably a safety. I mean, like I said, Xavier McKinney might not return. And even if he does, still need another safety. Because Jason Pinnock is, he's serviceable, but he's not a long-term option in my opinion. So we could go with a Javon Bullard or a Jaden Hicks. But Azeez Ojulari is always injured. So, why not get Chris Braswell? We need to get Kayvon Thibodeau some help. Moving on to 48, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there's a very real possibility that Calvin Ridley's not on the team next season. And if that is the case, you got a slot receiver in Christian Kirk, but not much else. Could go with a Jermaine Burton. Could go with a Tez Walker, Xavier Legette, Roman Wilson, although he's more of a slot guy. Christian Kirk and him wouldn't probably mesh as well. Same with Ricky Pearsall. I'm going to go with Tez Walker here. I know he didn't have the best Senior Bowl. He dropped a lot of balls, but he didn't drop many on tape at North Carolina or Kent State, so we're going to go with Tez Walker here. Moving on to 49, we got the Bengals. Tackle could be a possibility here, although I guess Kieran Amagaji could be a solid selection here. But they did franchise tag T. Higgins, and they could still move him. Tyler Boyd's also a free agent. I think Roman Wilson could be a really realistic option here. Or Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Polk, one of these receivers here. There's a lot of really solid ones. But I think Roman Wilson, having him in the slot, Jamar Chase on the outside, and if T. Higgins stays on the team, him and T. Higgins, I think that's a really, really solid receiving core for Joe Burrow to throw to. Moving on here to 50, we got the Eagles. And I think this is where we go linebacker. I didn't think there was a linebacker worth taking in the first round, but here in the second round, still another linebacker off the board. So I think it's between Peyton Wilson and Edgerrin Cooper. Peyton Wilson's probably the better athlete, but Edgerrin Cooper's got better size, no injury history. Peyton Wilson's got an extensive injury history. So I think we're going to go with Edgerrin Cooper. Could also go with Jeremiah Trotter for the storyline of his father played for the Eagles, but I don't think Jeremiah Trotter should be the first linebacker off the board. Moving on to 51, we got the Rams. And I think this could be a Michael Penix spot. I really think so. Matthew Stafford's not going to be, an elite quarterback or even a good quarterback much longer. I know Michael Penix is a little bit up there in age, but, having him sit behind Matthew Stafford for a year. Also, Matthew Stafford is always banged up. I know he's super tough, but he's also always banged up. I don't know. I really like Michael Penix in that Rams Sean McVay system. So say Matthew Stafford plays for one more year and have Michael Penix take over. I don't think there's going to be much of a beat missed with an old Matthew Stafford compared to an up-and-coming Michael Penix. Moving on to 52, we got the Steelers. And I think this could be maybe a cornerback pick. They are also in need of a linebacker with Cole Holcomb really being the only linebacker option. So again, a really athletic, really good linebacker, Payne Wilson. Just the injury history is not great. Moving on to 53, we got the Dolphins. And there's no tight end worth taking. We got, who did we draft again in the first round? We got Jackson Powers-Johnson. So I think this could be a receiver pick. Tyreek Hill is most likely, in all likelihood, going to retire after his contract, which is going to be up in a couple of years. Jalen Waddle's been in trade rumors, although I think he will stay around. But even so, Cedric Wilson's their number 3. I think you could upgrade that with a guy like Ricky Pearsall or a Jalen Polk, Xavier Legette maybe. We're going to go with Ricky Pearsall. He's just a really good separator, similar to a Ladd McConkey, but I know that leaves him with very little size with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Ricky Pearsall, but I don't know. I still think it's a fun pick. Moving on to 54, we got the Eagles picking over their second round pick. And I think this could be a safety pick. It's either safety or receiver. Julio Jones is, washed, unfortunately. They did just release Kevin Byers, so you could go with a Javon Bullard or a Jaden Hicks. But I think you're going to go with a receiver. The Eagles love their receiving options. They got Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, but they still need that number 3 receiver. And I think that could be a Jalen Polk. I think that could be an Xavier Legette, or I think it could be a Jermaine Burton. I think that it might be a Jermaine Burton. Devontae Smith is already a bit smaller, so you don't really want a Jalen Polk. I wouldn't say small, but slot-ish receiver. So we're going to go with Jermaine Burton, be that outside deep threat. Moving on to 55, we got the Browns. And I think this is where we could go with one of these safeties in Javon Bullard or Jaden Hicks. I like Javon Bullard a lot more, in my opinion. I still think Jaden Hicks is a fringe second-round player, but he's still a really good player. Moving on to 56, we got the Dallas Cowboys. And I said this in one of my recent videos. I think it was in my top 50 prospects video. Jonathan Brooks is, in my opinion, a Cowboy. If you don't know, the Dallas Cowboys doctor did Jonathan Brooks surgery on his ACL, so the Cowboys have a lot of inside detail on the injury of Jonathan Brooks. They also need a running back because Tony Pollard's probably not going to be on the team, so we're good with Jonathan Brooks here. Moving on to 57, we got the Packers, and David Bakhtiari's really up there in age. Why not get a developmental guy in a Kieran Amagaji? Moving on to 58, we got the Buccaneers. And like I said, in the first round, it was between edge rusher and cornerback. We ended up going edge rusher and layout to Latu. So why not come back and get a cornerback? And Mike Sanders still is a really, really good cornerback. He is a slot player, and I think that the Buccaneers could use him in a multitude of different ways. And so we're going to go with Mike Sanders still over a guy like Kyrie Jackson. Moving on to 59, we got the Texans, and it looks like there are a good amount of defensive tackles still on the board. It's hard to believe that all these guys are going to fall, but they ended up falling. So I think it's between Chris Jenkins and Brandon Fisk. T'Vondre Sweat's more of a nose tackle. We're going to end up going with Chris Jenkins. He had a really solid combine. And I've always been pretty high on a guy like Chris Jenkins. Moving on to 60, we got the Buffalo Bills. We went receiver. Which receiver did we go? We went A.D. Mitchell in the first round. I think this could be a cornerback pick because the Bills are also really thin at cornerback. And getting a big physical corner, Kyrie Jackson, amazing pick. Moving on to 61, we got the Detroit Lions. And I think this could be a edge rusher pick. Again, pairing up Aiden Hutchinson with somebody is probably a top priority for him. Wait a minute. Braylon Trace is still on the board. I did not know that. Again, I know he had a bad combine, but he should not be here at 67. Oh man, they kind of just ruined the mock draft. I mean, I would have probably had Braylon Trace go probably here to the Bears instead of an Adisa Isaac. I mean, I guess good players do fall. This wasn't a purposeful fall for Braylon Trace because I am a big fan of Braylon Trace. Didn't have the best combine, dropped a lot of weight, and still ran poorly. But the tape doesn't lie. He's a really, really good pass rusher. So we're going to go with Braylon Trace here to the Lions at 61. Although I don't expect Braylon Trace to be here at 61. It's kind of wild that the PFF board had him so low. Moving on to 62, we got the Ravens. And I think this could be a receiver pick. Like I said, we were close to going with a receiver in the first round. Why not get a guy like Jalen Polk to be that, slot receiver? Although I think Jalen Polk can play, slot receiver, or he could be that, outside receiver as well. I think he could play both. Move on to 63, we got the 49ers. And I think this could be a... What did we go in the first round again? We went Kingsley Suamatea. So we could look to go with an edge rusher here. Jonah Ellis, he's a raw prospect, but a really good one. It's either that or we go with a Christian Haynes or a Christian Mahogany. I don't know. I think the better option would be to go with Jonah Ellis out of Utah. And then rounding out the second round with the last pick, we got the Chiefs. And we are going to go with a guy who had a really solid combine in Braden Fisk to be that penetrating defensive tackle alongside hopefully Chris Jones if he returns. And that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of my picks down in the comment section. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.